My name is Donovan Lark. I'm 29 years old and I shoot commercial photography for a living, architecture, product campaigns, the occasional editorial spread for regional magazines. I work out of Portland, Oregon, which sounds more romantic than it actually is. Most days it means hauling a 40-pound equipment bag up 4 flights of stairs in the rain to photograph somebody's renovated kitchen for a real estate listing that will sell in 48 hours whether my photos are good or not. It's not glamorous work, but it's mine and I'm good at it, and on most nights that's enough. I dated Erin Sinclair for 2.5 years before we ended things. No blow-up, no third party, nothing dramatic enough to make a good story at a bar. We were good together in the beginning, the way two people who want the same things always are at first. And then, slowly we wanted different things, and we were too honest with each other to pretend otherwise. We called it off on a Tuesday evening, split a bottle of wine while we did it, and hugged goodbye at her apartment door like two adults who had genuinely liked each other and still did, just not in the way that made sense anymore. The only thing I hadn't accounted for was Mara. Erin's older sister was 34 at the time, a cardiothoracic surgeon at OHU, Oregon Health and Science University, up on the hill above the city. She had moved back to Portland 3 years earlier after finishing her fellowship at Johns Hopkins. During the years I was with Erin, Mara kept a careful, pleasant distance. She was always kind at family dinners, always interested in what I was working on, but never in a way that crossed any line. She was the kind of person who made you feel genuinely seen for exactly as long as the conversation lasted. And then she returned to her own world so completely, it was like a door closing softly. After Erin and I split, I assumed whatever thin connection I had with Mara would just dissolve. People don't stay in touch with their ex's older sisters. That's not how it works. Except 3 weeks later, she texted me. She was helping a colleague put together a photo archive for a hospital fundraiser and wanted my professional opinion on whether the images they had were usable or if they needed to be reshot. I looked at what she sent. They needed to be reshot. We went back and forth about lighting and framing for 45 minutes over text, and then she thanked me and went quiet. 6 weeks after that, she messaged again. A local coffee roaster she liked was redesigning their packaging, and she'd seen my work on a similar project and wondered if I knew anything about the process. I didn't, but I knew someone who did. We talked for 20 minutes. Then, here and there, nothing urgent, a photo she'd taken on a hiking trail outside Bend that she was curious about in terms of composition, a quick question about whether a camera was worth the price she'd been quoted, a message about a food cart pod near Powell's that she thought might be visually interesting, if I hadn't shot it already. I don't know exactly when I started looking forward to those messages. I only know that at some point I realized I was. Some people are loud when they enter your life. Mara came in through a side door you forgot existed, quietly, and then one day you turned around and she was already part of the room. 2 years went by like that. Then came the Saturday evening in October. I had been hired to photograph the annual fundraising gala for OHU's cardiac research department, the kind of event held in a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all Edison bulbs and exposed brick and women in floor-length dresses talking about endowment funds. My job was 3 hours of coverage, past appetizers, the keynote address, candid shots of donors feeling generous. I was there as the photographer. I was working. That's important for what comes next. I was 40 minutes in, swapping a lens near the edge of the room, when I saw her. Mara was sitting at a round table near the window, one chair away from a place setting that had been quietly cleared. She was in a dark green dress I'd never seen before. Her wine glass was full and untouched. She was looking at her phone with an expression I recognized from the few times I'd caught her off guard. Not sad, exactly. Just very, very still. I knew immediately. I flagged my second shooter to cover the room for 10 minutes, set my camera bag down on an empty cocktail table, and walked over. She was still looking at her phone when I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. She looked up. There was a half second where something moved across her face. Surprise, then something softer, then she put it away. I didn't know they hired you for this, she said. They didn't tell me you'd be here either. I nodded at the empty chair beside her. Rough night? She set her phone face down on the table. He texted at 7:43, said something came up and he'd try to make the second half. She glanced at the window. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. He's not coming. No, she said it flatly, without dramatics. I've known that for about 40 minutes. I've just been deciding how annoyed I actually am. How annoyed are you? She thought about it. A 4, maybe a 4.5, mostly at myself for being surprised. You shouldn't be surprised. He's an idiot. She looked at me for a second. Then, very quietly, she picked up her wine glass and took a sip, like something in her had eased just slightly. I stayed with her for the rest of the event. I did my job. I moved through the room, got the shots I needed, came back when I could. She talked to a few colleagues who stopped by the table. Between those interruptions, we fell into the kind of conversation we always had, the easy kind, about nothing important and everything comfortable. Somewhere between the silent auction and the final speech, she finally flagged down a passing server and ate something. It was just a small plate of appetizers. I don't know why that detail lodged itself in my chest, but watching her actually eat, watching some small, carefully maintained piece of her composure come down, I felt something I didn't stop to examine right away. When the event wrapped and I was packing my gear near the service entrance, Mara found me. Her coat was on. Her hair was slightly different from when the night started. A few strands come loose around her face, making her look less like the version of herself she presented to hospital boardrooms. "Thank you," she said, "for sitting with me. I was on my break." She gave me a look that made it clear she knew exactly what I was doing. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment, standing in the doorway with October coming through from outside. Then, "You're the only person I would have wanted to see tonight. I want you to know that." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just nodded, and she walked out into the rain. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. The city moved past my windows, wet streets, the orange blur of traffic signals, the reflection of headlights on the Burnside Bridge, and I just sat with what she'd said. The only person I would have wanted to see. I'd known Mara Sinclair for almost 4 years. I'd been careful about this for 2 of them. By the time I cut the engine in my building's parking lot, I understood that I wasn't being careful anymore. 4 days later, she texted, "There's a farmer's market at the PSU campus Saturday. I don't have to be in until noon. Are you ever up before 10? I replied in about 90 seconds, "I can be. What time?" 9. "Don't be late. I've seen how you are with deadlines." It was 8:57 when I got there. She was already standing near the entrance in a dark burgundy jacket, her hair loose instead of pulled back the way she wore it, in every professional context I'd ever seen her in. She looked different, younger, somehow, less armored. "You're 3 minutes early," she said. "I'm genuinely shocked." "You said 9. Most people here around 9. We walked for close to 2 hours. Mara bought a jar of local honey from a beekeeper who narrated the entire extraction process, whether she asked or not. A small bag of a single-origin Stumptown roast she'd been trying to track down for weeks, and a rust-colored wool scarf she ran her fingers over 3 separate times before she decided. I bought a bag of kettle corn because she stopped walking to smell it from 10 feet away, and then refused to admit she wanted any. We ended up on a bench by the South Park blocks, coffee in hand, watching the elms shed leaves in the thin, gray morning light. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then she said something that made me turn to look at her. "I've had 3 serious relationships since I moved back to Portland." She was watching a dog chase a squirrel it had absolutely no chance of catching. All 3 ended the same way. They were interested until they understood what the job actually looks like. On-call weekends, canceled plans, a phone that goes off at 2 a.m. because someone's heart is open on a table. She paused. They like the idea of a surgeon. They're less interested in what it costs her. "They weren't the right people," I said. She glanced at me sideways. "And you? You know what the job looks like. You've seen it." I thought about 2 years of late-night texts. The ones where she mentioned eating at her desk at 9 in the evening, or being in surgery for 11 hours, or driving home so tired she had to stop for coffee at a gas station on Barbour just to make it to her building. She never complained about any of it. She just stated it because it was the life she had chosen and she had made her peace. "I think they were scared of what you'd expect from them," I said. "Not scared of you." She looked at me. "What's the difference?" "Afraid of you means you're the problem. What I said means they are." She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I watched 2 more leaves come down from the elms before she spoke again. "That's a very tidy distinction," she said. "Is it wrong?" She didn't answer, but she reached into the kettle corn bag. The following Thursday, Aaron called me. We hadn't had an actual conversation in months. I almost let it go to voicemail. I don't know why I picked up. "Is this weird?" she said. "A little." Good, I'd be worried if it wasn't. She laughed once, dry and brief. I'm calling because Mara mentioned you, twice, in the same week. She let that land for a second. For Mara, that's basically a declaration. I didn't say anything. I'm not calling to make it complicated, Erin said, her voice quieter now. I just want you to know, she doesn't talk about people. She talks about cases and research and what's broken about hospital administration. She doesn't talk about people. A pause. She talked about you. After we hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time with the city humming outside my window, the room dark. I thought about the gala, the farmer's market, the kettle corn she'd pretended not to want, the way she'd looked at me on that bench when I said what I said. And I finally admitted to myself what I'd been steering around for 2 years. I wasn't falling for Mara Sinclair. I'd already fallen. I'd probably been there for a while, carrying it quietly the way you carry something you're not ready to name yet. And the thing I was most afraid of wasn't that she was Erin's older sister. The thing I was most afraid of was that I had no idea what she was going to do with it. I didn't text her that night. I just sat with it the way you have to sit with something real before you know what to do. It was Mara who texted first, around 11:30 on a Wednesday. I forgot to eat again. Deposition prep call in an hour for a malpractice case I'm peripherally involved in, and I am not in any way equipped for this evening. I knew that tone. I also knew she had a specific Thai place on Barbers she defaulted to when she was too exhausted to think about food. I got the green curry and pad CU and drove to her building. She answered the door in scrubs, reading glasses still on, hair in a braid that had mostly given up on itself. She looked tired in a way she didn't usually let anyone see. Not composed, not managing anything, just a person who had had a very long day and was almost through it. You didn't have to drive here, she said. You said you forgot to eat. That wasn't an invitation. I know. She stepped aside and let me in. We ate at her kitchen island. I looked over the deposition documents while she went through her notes, helped her build the timeline for the calls she'd need to walk through, argued with her about the order of 2 key points. She told me I was wrong about one of them. She was correct. I conceded it. She made a face that was almost a smile. When the call finally ended after midnight, she set her phone down and looked at me across the kitchen island. The refrigerator hummed. A car moved slowly down the street outside. I need to say something, she said. Her voice was careful in a way I wasn't used to from her. Mara was decisive. She knew what she meant, and she said it. This was different. I've been trying to call what's happening here something manageable, she said. Friendship, professional familiarity. Something with a clean edge I can file away. She paused. I can't do that anymore. Why now? I asked. She looked down at her hands. Because you drove across the city at 11:30 with Thai food, because I said I forgot to eat. And that is not what friends do. That's something else. And I'm tired of pretending I don't know the difference. I didn't move. I don't do this easily, she said quietly. I want you to understand that before anything else. I have spent a long time building a life where I don't depend on anyone else's timing or priorities or follow-through. I built that deliberately. I'm very good at it. She looked up at me. You are the only thing in my life right now that makes that feel like a loss instead of a strength. That landed somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I stood up and walked around the island until I was standing in front of her. She stayed where she was but turned to face me, and for once there was no version of herself she was managing for the room. Just Mara, tired and real, and looking at me like she'd already made a decision and was waiting to see if I'd made the same one. Then maybe we stop building around it, I said. She studied my face. The kind of look she probably gave a difficult case before committing to a course of action she knew was right and knew would be hard. I have early rounds Friday, she said. I know. And I'm not good at the uncertain middle parts, the open-ended things. I don't do well without knowing where something is going. Neither do I. Donovan. She said my name the way you say something you've been deliberately not saying for a while. Mara. She laughed, a small, surprised sound, like she hadn't expected it to come out of her, and then she reached across the counter and put her hand over mine. Not a grand gesture, just her palm, warm and still, resting over my hand. Okay, she said quietly, let's find out what this is. We didn't need anything beyond that. We sat at her kitchen island for another hour after the food was long gone, talking about things we hadn't said out loud before. She told me about her marriage. She'd been married briefly in her late 20s to someone in her program, and they'd ended it after 2 years when they both admitted they'd been choosing each other, mostly by proximity and expectation rather than actual choice. It had been quiet and mutual and still the loneliest experience of her adult life. After that, she said, she stopped letting people past a certain point. Either you earned it early and clearly, or you didn't get access at all. Most people didn't understand why, so they eventually stopped trying. I told her about the years after Aaron, not bitterness, just the specific quiet of being someone who was very good at showing up for other people and not particularly good at asking for the same thing back. She listened to all of it without once trying to fix any of it. That alone was worth more than I could have said. The day before our first real date, Erin called me again. She asked to meet for coffee. We sat at a place near Ladd's Addition, a neighborhood neither of us had any particular reason to be in, which felt right. She told me she'd been seeing someone new, a middle school teacher in Northeast who had strong opinions about backyard composting, and she seemed genuinely happy about it. She stirred her latte for a while before she got to the point. Mara doesn't ask for help, she said. She never has, not since we were kids. Even when things were hard, she just handled it alone, and then she acted like that was simply how things worked. She looked up at me. If you're going to be in her life the way I think you're going to be, you have to be willing to stay when she goes quiet. Because she will go quiet. It's not rejection. It's just how she processes things. I know, I said. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway. She's my sister. I need you to understand what you're walking into. I do. She nodded. Okay. Like that was the answer she'd needed to hear said out loud. I walked along the Willamette for a while after we said goodbye. The water was high from the fall rains. Everything smelled like wet leaves and river mud, and the particular quality of October that only really exists in the Pacific Northwest. I thought about what Aaron said, and I thought about all the careful ways I could approach this and what it would cost both of us if I did. I was done being careful. That evening, I took Mara to a restaurant she had mentioned exactly once in passing, a small Japanese place in Northwest that her surgical attending had taken her to during her residency rotation years ago, one she'd never gone back to and hadn't explained why. When I said the name to the host and we walked in, she stopped just inside the door. How did you remember that? She said. You mentioned it once, about 8 months ago. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I couldn't fully decode. Then she walked to the table. She ordered the omakase without looking at the menu. I let her talk, about a surgery earlier in the week that had almost gone wrong before it went right, about a resident she was supervising who had the instincts but not yet the patience, about the way hospitals sometimes had their own weather systems, their own version of time that ran parallel to the rest of the world without touching it. Somewhere between the third course and the fourth, her voice got quieter. There was a year during my fellowship, she said, where I worked so many consecutive hours I genuinely stopped being able to track them. I slept in the on-call room more than I slept in my apartment. Ate vending machine food at 2 a.m. and told myself it was temporary. She turned her wine glass slowly in her fingers. I got through it. I'm proud of that. But somewhere in all of it, I got used to not needing anything from anyone else. I got good at it. I made it part of how I thought about myself. She paused. I don't actually want to keep living like that. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Then, don't. She looked down at our hands, then back up at me. And for the first time since I had known her, Mara Sinclair looked like someone who wasn't managing anything at all. She just looked like herself. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront. The temperature had dropped, and the wind off the Willamette had a real edge to it. She shivered once, and I took off my jacket and put it around her shoulders without thinking about it. She started to protest, then stopped when her hand found something in the pocket. She pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph I had printed earlier that week, a single image, postcard-sized. It was a shot I had taken at the Gala, before I walked over to her table, before she knew I was there. She was sitting alone at the window, the city lights soft behind her wine glass full and untouched, looking out at something beyond the frame. Composed and a little distant, and, if you knew exactly where to look, quietly and privately tired, in a way she never let the room see. I'd kept it because something told me I would want it later. I hadn't understood what for until this week. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. You took this before you came over, she said. Yes. Why did you keep it? Because I saw you across that room and I didn't want to forget what that looked like. I exhaled slowly. I've been not saying things for 2 years, Mara. I'm done doing that. Whatever this is between us, it's been real on my side for a long time. I think you know that, and I think you've been figuring out what to do about it the same way I have. The wind moved through her hair. She looked at the photograph for another moment, and then she slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head against my shoulder. I'm going to be difficult sometimes, she said. Quiet. Certain. I work weekends. I cancel things. I go inside my own head and I don't always come back out immediately. I know. I'm not saying it as a warning, just as a fact. I know, I said again, and I'm telling you as a fact that I'm not going anywhere. She was quiet long enough that I heard the river below us and the low sound of traffic on the bridge overhead. Then, okay, she said. Just that one word, but she meant it the way Mara meant everything she actually committed to, completely and without revision. We made things official the following week. No announcement, nothing public. We just started. Dinner twice in those first 7 days. A Sunday morning walk through the Japanese garden when the fog was still sitting low in the trees. Texts at odd hours, same as always, except now I stopped pretending I wasn't watching for her name on my screen. She still has early rounds on Fridays. She still forgets to eat when a case is complicated. Her phone still goes off sometimes at 2 a.m., and when it does, she's dressed and out the door before she's fully awake, because that is who she is and what she chose, and I understood all of it before I walked across that room and sat down. There are mornings when she goes quiet, and somewhere inside herself I can't follow. I've learned not to knock on that door. I make her coffee. Black. Nothing in it, which I find genuinely baffling, but she is correct about this and wrong about it being a reasonable way to drink coffee, and I have decided to simply accept this about her, and I leave it where she'll find it. I sit in the same room, and I don't make it mean anything. She comes back. She always does. We argue about things that don't matter. Whether Portland rain is atmospheric or just relentless. Whether the omakase was better the first time or the third. Whether black coffee is a personal preference or a cry for intervention. She is wrong about the rain. She is right about the coffee. I have a strict personal policy of never admitting these two things in the same breath. We don't go to bed angry. We worked that one out early, and it is held. What I understand now, more than a year into this, is something I couldn't have put into words the night I set my camera down and walked across that gala room. I thought I was doing her a favor, keeping someone company who'd been left alone. I didn't understand yet that it was the most important thing I'd done in years. Mara told me once, on a quiet Sunday when we were both reading, and the rain was doing what Portland rain does in November, that she spent a long time convincing herself she didn't need a person who stayed. That needing that was either weakness or impracticality, given the life she had built. I put my book down. What changed? I asked. She thought about it for a moment. A real moment, the way Mara thought about things she actually meant. I stopped wanting to be right about that, she said. I think about the gala sometimes. The October rain and the Edison bulbs and the weight of my camera bag, and the moment I looked across that room and saw her sitting alone at the window, wine untouched, phone in hand, perfectly composed in a way that only meant the opposite if you knew what you were looking for. I think about the 3 seconds I stood there before I set the camera down. That's the thing about the moments that change everything. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with any signal that this one is the one that matters. They just sit there at a table by the window, waiting to find out if you have the sense to pull up a chair. I did. And not one day has passed since that I haven't been glad I did.